Chapter 2 is about working with the tax law. This chapter involves a lot of reading to kind of understand the layout or the framework of the legal structure regarding taxes in the United States. So I'm just going to kind of briefly skim through some of the highlights in this chapter, but in large part it's your responsibility to kind of read through the layout of this and ask me any questions that you might have. The chapter starts off discussing in Learning Objective 1 the tax sources. What are the law sources we have? And you'll see in the reading they break up the sources between primary sources and, although it's not discussed here, secondary sources. The primary sources of law are the things that can be used in court, basically or mostly as a defense for a particular position you have regarding your taxes. And within the primary sources of law, there are three kinds of sources. Statutory sources are the laws themselves, basically. The Internal Revenue Code is the primary statutory source of law. It lists all of the laws that are applicable to taxes in this country. The legislative process is discussed right here, how do laws come into existence. Here's a kind of a visual aid in terms of kind of depicting how laws are created by starting in the House Ways and Means Committee, going on to the House of Representatives. They vote. The Senate Finance Committee gets a say in kind of how they would structure a law. The Senate then thinks about and confers on what the Senate Finance Committee came up with, and then they might have to have joint conferences before the law eventually gets voted on by the president. As far as the arrangement of the code goes, the code is broken up into subtitles and chapters, and then eventually sections. And this is where you spend most of your time researching these various sections of the code. And you will see, let me go back up and find one. So it'll look like this. This is a typical site of a particular section in the code. You see section 2, A1A, and each of those components is broken down right here by this little visual aid. You have the section number, or the section symbol, the section number, then there's subsections denoted by lowercase letters, and then you have paragraphs and subparagraphs. And when you're citing the code, what you'll do in some of your research papers is you put the string together with no spaces in between them. You'll have to search around in Word for this section symbol. It is there. Let's see, what else? Treaties are also statutory sources of law. Then you move into administrative sources of law. These are kind of like explanations of the laws themselves in various formats. So Treasury Department or IRS regulations. Regulations, that's the proper name for interpretive guidance offered by the IRS that kind of explains what a law means. These include examples and are very, very helpful in understanding what the Internal Revenue Code is trying to say. Different kinds of regulations, so you should read through those. Some are very strong precedents and some are not available to be used as precedents, and you can read about these types of regulations here. There are revenue rulings and procedures. Again, more IRS guidance. Rulings are govern whether something is deductible or not, whether something is taxable or not. Procedures are more on procedural issues, guidance on procedural issues like how to go about filing a tax return or where to file it or how to respond to audits, things like that. Again, just reading. Letter rulings are also guidance provided by the IRS, but that's to a specific case proposed by a specific taxpayer, so it's not something that can be used as a precedence by other taxpayers. There's other information here. And then judicial sources of tax law also exist. Court cases. And there's all kinds of different courts out there, and you should read through the description of the courts, look at this diagram right here describing the courts, and kind of know which courts appeal to which other appellate courts, and in which circuit Michigan lies, for instance. You can see a big diagram to that effect right here, and I'll continue on the next slide, the next video.